I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, December 15th. We begin tonight with devastating news coming out of Australia. At least 15 people, including one of the shooters, were killed and many more were injured Sunday when two gunmen opened fire during a Jewish holiday celebration at Sydney's Bondi Beach. Australian authorities have since declared the attack an act of terrorism, prompting a major security response and renewed concerns about public safety and extremism. The footage you're about to see contains images that may be disturbing to some viewers.
Get down, boys, get down. Oh my God.
Police say one suspect was shot and killed by officers, while a second was arrested and remains in critical condition. Police have confirmed the shooters were a father and son. At least 29 people were wounded, including 2 police officers. That's according to New South Wales Police Commissioner.
Last night I announced that I had determined that it was a terrorist activity and made a declaration as such as 9:36 p.m. As a result of that declaration, we commenced Operation ARQUS, ARQUES, which is a joint counter-terrorism operation. That is New South Wales Police working very closely with our Commonwealth partners to ensure that we thoroughly investigate the circumstances of the incident yesterday. We have progressed at pace overnight with that investigation, and as a result of investigations undertaken, I can say that we are not looking for a further offender. We are satisfied that there were 2 offenders involved in yesterday's incident. One is deceased. The second is in critical but stable condition in hospital at the moment. The offenders are a 50-year-old and 24-year-old male who are father and son. The 50-year-old is deceased. The 24-year-old is currently in hospital at the moment. As part of the investigation, we conducted 2 search warrants last night, one at Bonnie Rig and a second at Campsie. The 50-year-old male is a licensed firearms holder. He has 6 firearms licensed to him. We are satisfied that we have 6 firearms from the scene yesterday, but also as a result of the search warrant at the Campsie address. Ballistics and forensic investigation will determine this morning that those 6 firearms are the 6 that were licensed to that man, but also that they were used in the offence yesterday at Bondi.
The attack comes amid a wave of anti-Semitic incidents that have shaken Australia over the past year. Authorities say there is no confirmed link between those incidents and Sunday's shooting, though they confirmed that one of the gunmen was previously known to security services. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese spoke to the media about the attack.
What we saw yesterday was an act of pure evil, an act of anti-Semitism, an act of terrorism on our shores in an iconic Australian location, Bondi Beach, that is associated with joy, associated with families gathering, associated with celebrations, and it is forever tarnished by what has occurred last evening. This was an attack deliberately targeted at the Jewish community on the first day of Hanukkah, which of course should be a joyous celebration, and the Jewish community are hurting today. Today, all Australians wrap our arms around them and say, we stand with you. We will do whatever is necessary to stamp out anti-Semitism. It is a scourge and we will eradicate it together. The Australian Federal Police and ASIO are working closely with New South Wales authorities, and the briefing we've just had, we have had the AFP there, and the AFP Commissioner will return to Australia today. We will dedicate every single resource that is required in responding to this. To the brave responders, first responders, including ordinary citizens who acted yesterday, thank you for what you do. People rushing towards danger to show the best of the Australian character. That's who we are. people who stand up for our values. Flags will fly at half-mast across the country today as we pay our respects to all those lost and all those who have been injured. And we conclude by saying that yesterday was indeed a dark day in our nation's history, but we as a nation are stronger than the cowards who did this. Australia will never submit to division, violence or hatred, and we will come through this together. We refuse to let them divide us as a nation.
Following the news of the shooting, U.S. President Donald Trump paid his respects to the victims of the attack on Bondi Beach.
As you know, that was a terrible attack, 11 dead, 29 badly wounded, and that was an anti-Semitic attack, obviously. And I just want to pay my respects to everybody, but to Australia and the Prime Minister, to everybody that we know so well, we get along with so well. We have a great relationship. That's a terrible situation going on over there. Think of that. You probably read it's been a very, very brave person, actually, who went and attacked frontally one of the shooters and saved a lot of lives. So, very brave person who's right now in the hospital, pretty seriously wounded. So, great respect to that man that did that. But we're here for a different reason. We're here to celebrate Christmas and to celebrate, and I think today we can say loudly, we celebrate Hanukkah, because that was such a horrible attack. That was a purely anti-Semitic attack.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called out Prime Minister Anthony Albanese for promoting and encouraging anti-Semitism in Australia, which he believes is what led to the deadly Bondi Beach shooting.
On August 17th, about 4 months ago, I sent Prime Minister Albanese of Australia a letter in which I gave him warning that the Australian government's policy was promoting and encouraging anti-Semitism in Australia. I wrote, "Your call for a Palestinian state pours full fuel on the anti-Semitic fire. It rewards Hamas terrorism. It emboldens those who menace Australian Jews and encourages the Jew hatred now stalking your streets. Anti-Semitism is a cancer. It spreads when leaders stay silent. It retreats when leaders act. I call upon you to replace weakness with action, appeasement with resolve. Instead, Prime Minister, you replaced weakness with weakness and appeasement with more appeasement. Your government did nothing to stop the spread of anti-Semitism in Australia. You did nothing to curb the cancer cells that were growing inside your country. You took no action. You let the disease spread. And the result is the horrific attacks on Jews we saw today. We saw an action of a brave man, turns out a Muslim brave man, and I salute him, that stopped one of these terrorists from killing innocent Jews. But it requires the action of your government, which you're not taking. And you have to, because history will not forgive hesitation and weakness. It will honor action and strength. That's what Israel expects of each of your governments in the West and elsewhere, because the disease spreads and it will consume you as well. But we are worrying right now about our people, our safety, and we do not remain silent. We fight those who try to annihilate us.
Canadian politicians and community groups shared messages of support following the attack. Prime Minister Mark Carney, in a statement Sunday, said Canadians stand with Jewish people in Australia and across the world in light of the horrific attack. And Australian leaders are pledging to strengthen the country's already strict gun control laws following the attack. Among the measures announced today are proposed limits on the number of firearms an individual can own, along with tighter oversight and regular reviews of gun licenses over time.
The government is prepared to take whatever action is necessary. Included in that is the need for tougher gun laws. And this afternoon at 4 o'clock, I will put on the agenda of the National Cabinet tougher gun laws, including limits on the number of guns that can be used or licensed by individuals. A review of licences over a period of time. People's circumstances change. People can be radicalised over a period of time. Licences should not be in perpetuity. And checks, of course, making sure that those checks and balances are in place as well.
The announcements come as authorities and lawmakers face renewed pressure to address public safety. Coming up after the break, U.S. President Donald Trump responded to another mass shooting over the weekend at Brown University that left 2 students dead. We'll have this story and more news after the break. Now to a developing story coming out of Rhode Island. President Donald Trump responded to the mass shooting over the weekend at Brown University, telling a crowd gathered at the White House that, quote, things can happen, while offering deepest regards to the families of students who died and urging a speedy recovery for the injured.
And Brown University, great school, great, really one of the greatest schools anywhere in the world. Things can happen. So to the 9 injured, get well fast, and to the families of those 2 that are no longer with us, I pay my deepest regards and respects from the United States of America. Thank you very much. It's a very important thing to say.
The attack at Brown, an Ivy League school in Rhode Island, on Saturday left at least 2 people dead and 9 injured. Authorities detained a person of interest in the shooting, but later released the individual and resumed searching for the shooter. In the aftermath, Brown University has canceled all remaining classes, exams, papers, and projects for the semester. School officials have also told students that they may leave campus, highlighting the scale of the disruption and the seriousness of the attack. Providence Mayor Brett Smiley provided an update on the investigation.
There remain 7 individuals in stable condition, 1 in critical but stable condition, and 1 has been discharged. Those are the 9 individuals injured yesterday. We talked yesterday multiple times about the tremendous cooperation and amount of law enforcement resources that were made available to us. And I want to offer my profound thanks to all the hardworking men and women in law enforcement who worked through the night to be able to get us to this point where we can confirm that there is a person of interest who has been detained.
Crowds gathered at a Providence Park Sunday evening to honor the victims of Brown University's shooting.
The sun's turning.
I always felt that Brown is such a safe place. So it really kind of hits home, and I know a lot of people were talking about this isn't something that I ever thought would happen here. I think we definitely all really need this, and of course I'm particularly sorry and sad for the people who were injured and killed and their families. We're all very sad and coming out of a period of being very scared. Everybody's kind of probably going to leave in the next few days from campus. The semester kind of got cut short, so I think I wanted to come out here in particular as a time when everybody is going to be together to be able to kind of have some closure together on the semester.
And no given.
Hollywood director, actor, and producer Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle Reiner were found dead on Sunday in their Brentwood home in Los Angeles. Authorities are investigating the deaths as an apparent homicide, with sources indicating the couple suffered stab wounds. Paramedics responded to a medical emergency call around 3:30 and 3:40 p.m., discovering the bodies at the scene. The Los Angeles Police Department's Robbery Homicide Division is leading the probe.
So at approximately 3:40 this afternoon, Los Angeles police officers, along with the Los Angeles City Fire Department, responded to the 200 block of Chadbourne Avenue here in the city of Brentwood. Upon arrival, they determined that there were 2 deceased individuals inside of the residence. The Los Angeles Police Department is now conducting an investigation at this residence here on Chadbourne, and that investigation will continue over the coming days. We will not be releasing any information regarding who was found deceased in the residence, because that will be done by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office. At this time, the Los Angeles Police Department is not seeking anyone as a suspect or as a person of interest or in any other manner, and we will not be doing that until we conduct our investigation and we move forward. We have not identified a suspect at this time. Now, when I tell you that we have not identified a suspect, it doesn't mean that we're not working the case. We will not identify a suspect until that person is identified as a suspect and we're legally seeking them if there is a crime to be reported and if that person is a suspect in that crime. There are going to be many family members interviewed. I'm not going to confirm whether someone's being interviewed at this time or not. We're going to try and speak to every family member that we can to get to the facts of this investigation.
Rob Reiner's son has been taken into custody, and jail records show that he was booked on suspicion of murder and is being held for a $4 million bail. Tributes have poured in across Hollywood and beyond, highlighting Reiner's iconic contributions to film and television. 2 U.S. soldiers and a U.S. civilian interpreter have been killed in Syria following an ambush by an Islamic State gunman, according to U.S. Central Command. 3 additional American service members were injured in the attack. Officials say the gunman was also killed. Syria's state media reported that 2 Syrian service personnel were also wounded in the incident. U.S. President Donald Trump described the attack as an ISIS assault targeting both U.S. and Syrian forces, warning that what he called a very serious retaliation.
I can tell you in Syria, there will be a lot of damage done to the people that did it. They got the individual person, but there'll be big damage done. And the other, supposedly, they call him a person of interest, so I'll keep it along those lines.
Syria's president later sent condolences to Donald Trump following the attack. And according to arguments made in court last week, a Toronto area lawyer was a key member of Ryan Wedding's inner circle in what has become a global manhunt for the alleged drug kingpin. Our contributor David Clement has more.
In a courtroom drama unfolding in Toronto, a veteran defense lawyer stands accused of being a pivotal figure in a multi-billion-dollar drug empire led by fugitive Ryan Wedding, with ties to murder and cocaine trafficking. Deepak Paradkar, a 62-year-old Toronto area attorney, is fighting for bail amid explosive allegations from U.S. prosecutors that paint him as a key advisor in Wedding's criminal inner circle. Let's start with the man at the center of this web, Ryan Wedding, a wanted fugitive believed to be hiding out in Mexico. The FBI has long pursued him for heading a massive cocaine trafficking operation. U.S. authorities claim he's responsible for orchestrating the murder of an FBI informant in Colombia back in January as part of efforts to protect his network. Wedding's alleged empire involves paying associates with cash and luxury perks, and now Paradkar is one of 8 Canadians charged last month with aiding this operation. The charges against Paradkar are stunning, especially for someone who's sworn to uphold the law. Prosecutors say he abused his position as a lawyer to gather intelligence for Wedding's cocaine ring and even advised on the murder of that FBI informant. Now, Crown Attorney Heather Graham, arguing against bail, described Paradkar as living a double life, complete with unexplained wealth that far exceeds his claimed $500,000 annual income as a criminal defense attorney. We're talking about bulk cash drops, Rolex watches, Gucci bags, designer suits, and a fleet of high-end cars, including a 2023 Mercedes-Benz, a 2022 Maserati, and a 2017 Maserati, each valued at over $200,000. Graham didn't mince words in court, calling Paradkar a serious flight risk with access to vast resources and connections. She pointed out his vacation in Mexico last year, just before the informant's killing in Colombia, and warned that he could flee there or anywhere else, saying, quote, "Mexico isn't the only place available to Mr. Paradkar. With access to these types of resources and connections, the world is his oyster." The Crown insists this case is exceptional, aggravated by Paradkar's status as an officer of the court, and that no bail conditions can mitigate the risks of him vanishing or tampering with evidence. On the defense side, Paradkar's lawyer is pushing back hard. He argues that bail can't be denied just because of the case's notoriety under Canadian law. He emphasized that Paradkar's alleged value to Wedding's organization was purely his legal expertise, which has now been stripped away because his law license was suspended. Paradkar himself proposed a hefty $5 million bail, split between him and his wife, saying it's basically their entire life savings. He offered strict conditions like a GPS bracelet, surrendering his passport and devices, and essentially 24-hour house arrest. Family members testified in support, claiming those luxury cars were leased and no longer in use, though the Crown countered that the leases alone point to extravagant spending. Evidence presented in the hearing includes provincial records of those luxury vehicles and questions about Paradkar's true net worth, which Graham called incalculable, given the FBI's claims of gang payments. The Crown also raised doubts about whether Paradkar's relatives were aware of his alleged double life as they showed up to back up his release plan. Paradkar has cited health issues and harsh jail conditions as reasons for bail, but the Crown argued that detention here is necessary. This case highlights the shadowy intersections of organized crime with Weddings network tied to murders and massive drug shipments. As extradition looms for Paradkar, the bail decision could come soon, potentially setting the stage for a high-stakes trial. We'll be watching closely as more details emerge from this trans-border investigation. Back to you.
Coming up after the break, Statistics Canada reported that Canada's annual inflation rate held steady at 2.2% in November. We'll have this story and more of today's top national and international headlines after the break. Forum Daily News will be back shortly. Statistics Canada reported today that Canada's annual inflation rate held steady at 2.2% in November. However, grocery prices continue to climb, reaching their highest annual increase in nearly 2 years. Food inflation rose 4.7% in November, up from 3.4% in October, marking the largest jump in grocery price growth since December 2023. Fresh fruit, especially pricier berries, drove the increase, as did other food preparations. Economist Dr. Moshe Lander joined us to unpack some common misconceptions about inflation and how Canadians should be reacting to these trends.
I think the biggest thing is that we had that disruption in the aftermath of COVID where inflation took off to this generationally high 8%. And then everybody's freaked out about inflation now and they're focusing on it. If you look over the last 30 years since the Bank of Canada was given independence from government control, they've managed to keep inflation between 1% and 3% pretty much every month for 30 years. They know what they're doing. And even though nobody really knows who the governor of the Bank of Canada is, nobody really knows what he looks like, everybody has to remind themselves every 6 to 7 weeks, oh yeah, that's the guy. The reality is that I don't think that it's something that Canadians have to fundamentally worry about. I know that we've really gotten caught up in this cost of living and affordability issues, and these are legitimate concerns for sure. But if you look over the last 10 years, say since the Trudeau government came into power, prices have risen 30%. That sounds like a lot, but that's about an average of about 2.5% per year compounded. And since that includes the 18 months where inflation went really crazy, that's actually extremely successful. The previous 10 years, which was mostly the Harper government, prices rose about 20%. So the difference really is that one freaky year. Other than that, there's really no difference that's gone on in this 10-year period compared to the last 10-year period. The reason why people are so frustrated by affordability and cost of living issues is not inflation, but it's because their wages haven't kept pace. And that's something fundamentally different. And we failed to focus on that probably for the better part of the last 40 years. And it's now reaching a point where it's hard to ignore.
With markets continuing to shift and economic headlines coming from every direction, investors are looking for clarity on what really matters right now. From the overall health of the Canadian economy to changing financial conditions across North America, there's no shortage of uncertainty and opportunity. To help us cut through the noise and better understand what could be ahead, we're joined now by Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Limited. Brendan, as always, thank you for the time.
Well, thank you. I take it from your lead in, inflation isn't up very much unless you need to eat. So, yeah, we can start unpacking that, Teresa. You go right ahead.
Well, let's talk about the determining factor. What does this mean when you're investing?
Really, interest rates are the determining factor because interest rates are the price of money. It's what it costs to have access to money. And the higher interest rates are, the higher the price for anything is. Interest rates are the measure for that cost. So the higher interest rates are, and it's true with anything, the demand will be less. So higher interest rates, less demand, lower interest rates, greater demand. At least that's the theory. So that if they crank up interest rates from the Bank of Canada, which your lead-in interview guest was talking about the governor of the Bank of Canada and his relative anonymity, I think that's probably a good thing. To the extent central bankers become political figures, what could possibly go wrong? Mark Carney, call your office. So the central banks have the ability to adjust short-term rates, specifically the rates to which they lend to the commercial banks, which then impacts the prime rate and the short-term borrowing rates. So they have the biggest impact in that area. And generally speaking, it's one of the tools that the central banks use to either make money more available when the economy is slow and less available when the economy begins to heat up. So when they're trying to slow down the economy, they'll raise interest rates. When they're trying to rejuvenate it, they'll lower interest rates. At least that's the theory. The issue both here and south of the border that we've seen is that rates have been lowered, at least in part, for political reasons. And when that happens, it doesn't get reflected in the consumer price index, which is the numbers that came out this morning. Where you see that reflected is in asset inflation. And although your leading guest was talking about how inflation hadn't been very high for the last 20-odd, 30-odd years, he's really talking about the prices of goods and services, everything from food to rental costs to energy. What has gone up is asset prices. If you keep interest rates low, some of that may trickle down to the main street. Maybe somebody builds a plant. But generally speaking, shorter-term rates don't determine longer-term investments when it comes to illiquid investments like plant and equipment. What it does tend to trigger is more investments in, stocks and real estate and other capital-intensive investments. So you'll see asset inflation, which we've seen for the last 30-plus years when interest rates are low. So they've been cutting rates, particularly in the U.S., because the president's been putting a lot of pressure on the Federal Reserve, the U.S. central bank, to cut rates. Likely in May of next year, he's going to put a central banker, chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve, more to his liking, more inclined to have lower rates. So I think it'll be for investors, the determining factor will be interest rates, and I think at least short-term interest rates should remain lower for longer.
And in your opinion, is the Canadian economy strong?
No, I mean, depends how you measure it, but essentially no. And at the very least, it's not nearly as strong as it should be. Now, it's a trap of resource-based economies that they stay resource-based economies. Most of the really dynamic economies in the world are a little bit shy of resources. I mean, the U.S.'s prosperity is not based on its tremendous resources, although it's a big country and it has a fair amount of lots of things. It's not really a resource economy the way that Canada has been. A resource economy tends to be much more subject to macro global economic forces, but it's also subject to local political forces. And in Canada, we've been remiss in the development of the resources we do have. And also, we've been probably over-reliant on them, energy being the biggest one, to the expense of really building up industrial or technology companies that are world beaters. We don't even have that many resource companies that are world beaters where we're the takeover or rather than the takeover E. And head offices matter. I mean, Toronto is as prosperous as it is because it has so many head offices here. Merely having resources without the mind and the decision making that for the deployment of the resources isn't a formula for prosperity the way having a head office is. So yeah, Canadian economy isn't doing as well as it could be, and it's certainly not doing as well as it is relative to our neighbors south of the border.
Now, you've already talked about this a little bit, but let's switch back to interest rates. Do you see them coming down in Canada, or what are we looking at right now?
I don't know there'll be interest rate cuts, although the the inflation rate, the core inflation rate, was a little bit lower than people expected, and well within the range. But the price of food, as was noted, is up tremendously. And I must push back a little bit on your entry guest who said, well, it's just that 1 year. But every inflation number that's happened since the one balloon year a couple years back in inflation, every increase in inflation is off that bigger number. And he's right in this much: people's wages haven't kept up, which is a sign that corporate profitability hasn't kept up, which is a sign that individual productivity hasn't kept up. So there's a lot of factors there, but the short answer is wages aren't going up 4.7%. And for some large percentage of Canadians, I mean, our food bank, the Avenue Road Food Bank at Avenue Road in DuPont, when we opened that in 2018, we served maybe 80 families a week. Now we now serve 500 families a week. The price of food is a determining factor in a way that it hasn't been, I would say, since the Depression, but I don't think there were 500 person lineups, that 1,000 family lineups, 1,000 people represented by that anywhere in the city, even in the Depression. So the price of food is a really big issue here. So I don't know that they're going to cut interest rates more, because that may feed inflation to a greater degree without necessarily helping the people that earn wages.
And in the United States, what are their interest rates looking like? I mean, are they also struggling with food prices?
Well, they are, but their productivity has been generally greater. Food and accommodation have been both issues in the US, but they have this one advantage: their temperature is generally warmer. We simply have to burn more calories to stay alive. In the United States, they have a few more options, and they have a more dynamic economy. I expect their interest rates are going to come lower, not for economic reasons, but for political reasons. I expect that will continue to fuel in the price of investment assets, particularly the stock market. I do not see the stock market having a long-term pullback anytime soon. In other words, I see the current expansion, if you want to use the term bubble, I see the current bubble continuing.
Well, Brendan, thank you for the time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Teresa.
Stay with us. We'll have more of today's top headlines right after the break. We'll be right back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is willing to drop Ukraine's bid to join NATO in exchange for firm security guarantees from Western allies. Zelensky made the comments following talks in Berlin on Sunday with U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as diplomatic efforts to end the war continue. Speaking to reporters, Zelensky firmly rejected U.S. proposals that would require Ukraine to give up territory to Russia, calling those ideas unworkable. He stressed that any security guarantees offered to Ukraine must be legally binding.
We are now preparing for meetings with the American side and our European friends in the coming days. Berlin. There will be many events. There will be a report from Umarov and our negotiation team about the contacts they have already had. General Hanatov and representatives of the Ukrainian defense and security sector will be working on the details of security guarantees for Ukraine, for Ukrainians. At the same time, Ukrainian officials are continuing discussions with America and Europe about the real recovery of Ukraine, the real development of Ukraine after the war. The most important meetings I will have are with representatives of President Trump. There will also be meetings with our European partners, with many leaders regarding the foundation of peace, a political agreement to end the war. Right now, the opportunity is significant. This is important for every one of our cities. It is important for every Ukrainian community of ours. We are working to ensure that peace for Ukraine is dignified, that there is a guarantee, above all, a guarantee that Russia will not return to Ukraine with a third invasion.
Speaking ahead of the foreign ministers' meeting, the EU's foreign policy chief said that the EU had to have very important discussions on funding Ukraine this week, but acknowledged that talks over using frozen Russian assets were getting harder.
What we have to keep in mind is that why countries want to be in NATO is because they don't want Russia to invade them, to attack them. And that's why, Sweden and Finland joined NATO. That's why the Baltic states joined NATO, to have this defense umbrella, really. Now, if this is not in question, or this is out of the question, then we need to see what are the security guarantees that are tangible. They can't be, papers or promises. They have to be, real troops, real capabilities, so that Ukraine is able to defend itself.
Tim Hodgson, the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, highlighted recent progress on federal support for Canada's forest sector. He also announced several new initiatives, including the launch of a single-window pathfinding service, funding to encourage the use of Canadian wood in construction, and the creation of the Canadian Forest Sector Transformation Task Force.
Since August, we have actioned bold measures worth $2.35 billion to secure the long-term sustainability of Canada's forestry sector. These measures announced by the Prime Minister will enable our forest sector to not only adapt, but to thrive. Today, I'm pleased to announce the next significant step we are taking to strengthen and revitalize our industry. First, we are making federal programs easier to navigate through Natural Resources Canada's new single window concierge service. This single window will be a one-stop shop for companies to find information on every program available to support them. We will also be providing direct access to personalized help from Natural Resources Canada experts, so companies can spend more time building and less time navigating bureaucracy. Second, through the Natural Resource Canada's Green Construction Through Wood program, we are providing over $9 million to 5 new projects that will help accelerate the adoption of innovative Canadian wood products, such as mass timber in construction across this country, hopefully like this. These projects will tackle insurance challenges, develop a mass timber costing guide, advance building code changes for low-carbon materials, expand wood construction education, and increase the use of wood solutions through technical support and training. To unlock the full potential of the industry, our government is also investing $500 million to renew Natural Resources Canada's suite of forest sector transformation programs, including the Green Construction Through Wood program.
The Alberta Teachers Association is filing a complaint with the Labour Relations Board for unfair bargaining practices. The group's president, Jason Schilling, says they are also filing 61 grievances in each bargaining unit across the province. Schilling says the government promised 3,000 new teachers, but what they are getting are teachers that were already on the books to be hired in Budget 2025. He says that was never part of the conversation during bargaining.
They used this to insist that their offer matched the request the ATA made at the bargaining table. They used it to create an illusion of significant new investment in classrooms. But now, after imposing a legislated contract on teachers, the government insists that the phrase net new, which is how the promise was always phrased, simply meant any increase over the prior year, even if those positions were already funded in Budget 2025. If that was their interpretation, then nothing was new at all. The 3,000 teachers they pointed to during the bargaining were already announced, already budgeted, and already counted in the 2025 budget in February.
Egypt has unveiled the restoration of 2 colossal statues of a prominent pharaoh in the southern city of Luxor. The reveal is the latest in a series of archaeological projects aimed at attracting more tourists to the country.
This project has in mind, and I hope we fulfilled not only our what we had projected, our project, but our dreams also, to save the last remains of a once prestigious temple. It was the largest of all.
When they found actually those statues, they found it separated in very fragmentary conservation and state, and of course they have to work on it for more than 19 years in order to put everything together, in order to collect all several pieces. And today we are celebrating actually the finishing and erecting of these two colossal statues, that it will add a lot to the Luxor in general and to the funerary temple of the king, trying to revive how this funerary temple of King Amenhotep III looked like a long time ago.
And in sports, the Kansas City Chiefs' postseason hopes are done, and so is Patrick Mahomes' season. Mahomes suffered an injury to his left knee in the final 2 minutes of Sunday's loss to the Los Angeles Chargers, and the injury will keep Mahomes out for the remainder of the season.
Watching it again, hit by hand. Watch as he goes to the ground. It looks like that. Oh, the left knee. Yep, you saw it. You saw like it almost like it popped. It almost hyperextends, like it straightens out as it hits into the ground. Watch this next step, the left knee right here.
The Chiefs announced after Sunday's game that Mahomes had suffered a torn ACL in his left knee and said that they were exploring surgical options. Further specifics on his recovery or a timeline for his return are not yet known, but it is being reported that he could take up to 12 months to recover. Canada fell 4-1 to the United States in the fourth and final game of their women's hockey rivalry series. The U.S. won all 4 games of the series. Canadian captain Marie-Philip Poulin says that there's still time for Canada to sharpen its game ahead of February's Olympic Games. Canada opens defense of its Olympic gold medal on February 4th against Finland in Milan, Italy. The legendary U.S. hockey team that stunned the world by defeating the Soviet Union at the 1980 Lake Placid Olympics received another honor this week. Members of the iconic Miracle on Ice squad gathered at the White House, where President Donald Trump marked their historic victory. Trump celebrated the team's improbable run after signing legislation earlier this week, formally honoring their achievement.
This is H.R. 452, the Miracle on Ice bill. The United States Congress has authorized 3 medals to be struck commemorating the historic victory of the United States men's hockey team in 1980 at the Lake Placid Olympics, where they obviously defeated the Russians or the Soviet Union, in the famous Miracle on Ice hockey game. This will serve as a fitting commemoration of that incredible achievement and will hopefully be a lasting memorial of that achievement going forward. So.
On behalf of the team, we have a replica hat that we wore at the opening ceremonies in Lake Placid. We'd like you to have that. And more importantly, I don't think words can explain how proud we are for what you've done for our team.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's see, what do I do with that strap?
There you go.
Remember a certain governor in Massachusetts, when they put that helmet on, that was not good.
Candy company Mars Canada is bringing back Hudson's Bay's popularized holiday windows. The team behind it was wandering by the department store's former Toronto flagship when it got the idea to revive the windows. Mars has filled them with 7 scenes depicting a day in the life of the company's elves. Until Mars stepped in, the HBC windows were due to be empty this holiday season because the department store filed for creditor protection and closed all of its stores earlier this year. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on X and TikTok. Good night, Canada.